right. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning. We're going to talk about conversational analytics. And here with us is Camden from Underdog Fantasy, our customer. This is our first co-hosted webinar, so we're very excited. Before, we're going to do a short intro about elementary, and then we're going to dive into Underdog's conversational analytics. Camden is going to talk about how conversational analytics are built, and then he's going to show some AI workflows that he's running to maintain things. So just a little bit about elementary. So we're the creators of the elementary data open source. We're doing a shift left for data quality and governance. We have an open source that is used by thousands of data teams worldwide. We created Elementary Cloud to give more coverage end-to-end before and after the data warehouse with proactive monitoring, performance optimizations. We have the catalog for asset discovery and governance, and we also have automated PR reviews. Elementary Cloud meets users where they are. So we have our agentic abilities that are available on Slack. You can always ask any question you want about your data, your open incidents. You can answer on the threads with your alerts and have them investigated on the spot. And we aim to give you trusted data in your AI analytics as well. If you use Elementary as part of your AI analytics cycle, you get flagged whenever there's something wrong with the underlying data you're performing your analytics on, and then you can trust your answers better. This is just an example that we created with Cloud Code, very basic, much more basic than you're about to see in this webinar. But this is a place where you can just ask Claude one of your business questions and you get flagged when there's a freshness open issue in one of your tables that you've queried. We're very excited to be part of this new world where we are migrating from traditional BI analytics to AI analytics. And we're super excited to introduce Camden. Camden, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Living the dream.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Underdog Fantasy and what your company does?
Yeah, so Underdog, it is not a pet store, though some people think that. We're also not Datadog. I would say we're the better dog, but we basically have the game within the game, is what we say, that have the most fun app that's out there. So allowing you to build teams, put money down on your favorite athletes, sports, etc. We just have a lot of different offerings that span drafts and fantasy and all sorts of things to let sports fans basically go wild. And so we have an app you can download and play there. I lead analytics engineering on that team. And so I want to give a shout out to Eamon for bringing me along and giving me the room to really transform maybe the traditional analytics engineering role into more of a conversational analytics engineering role that does all the things from working on staging and metrics and all that stuff, but also getting us away from maybe the traditional BI world, which you talked about. So yeah, that's the TLDR on me.
So you're a second time elementary user, right?
That is correct. Sorry for these people on the call. I used to work at Flock Safety, which was another high growth startup. Used elementary there. Shout out to Corey. And then came over to Underdog, and actually they already had it or they were working through the contract. And so it has been a second time and have kept it in both places because it's a real asset to the things we do.
So your new title is Conversational Analytics Engineering Manager. Can you tell us a little bit more about this role and why it exists now?
Yeah, so maybe more self-prescribed. I put it in my title on LinkedIn, and then we can talk about getting the paperwork in order to make it official. But no, it's definitely a lot of my job is an extension of the traditional analytics engineering role, like building the tables, building the YAML files, all the stuff we do in DBT. But then there was the semantic layer, maintaining that, and then we'll talk more about it, but you talk about guides and MD files and long text. There is just a management of data ontology that I think this position uniquely holds between the business and data engineering. And so that is my day to day, is making sure that system tinkers along.
You really enabled AI analytics at Underdog. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started, how everything is built?
Yeah, we can get into it. So I actually have some slides because I'm type A. So let me share that. So at Underdog, I guess maybe take a step back. We're probably all familiar with the right picture, traditional BI. You think about not the name, all the apps, but the Lookers, the Sigmas, the Power BIs, the Tableaus. A user having a question, then tapping an analytics team with a bunch of Slack messages. creating a Jira backlog, deciding who's going to build the dashboard, where does it live, what do we do with this thing, and then ultimately the user either not getting the right answer or wanting to augment the dashboard a million times or whatever the case might be. Just burning a lot of cycles is the way I like to think about it. Conversational analytics looks more like the left side. We can just put these assets and design a system in the hands of the user to where ask your question to a robot and let the robot check all our assets, give you an answer, and y'all iterate it back and forth over and over again. And there's two things that are unique with this deployment is that your breadth, you can have 1,000 people at your company, 100 people at your company. They can all be asking questions at the same time. Analytics engineering throughput, not a bottleneck as much anymore because you can have limitless agents doing this sort of stuff. And then from the depth perspective, there's definitely times that analytics should still build dashboards, especially when things are codified or put things in tables. But I would say the depth of the metadata you get back on the right side, it's like a cycle of trying to capture a lot of interactions. On the left side, we have the thread, we have the conversation, we have the user doubt, the things used, and we continue to spin that flywheel. So, to your point about our journey at Underdog, over the last 90 days, we have 150 unique Underdog employees. So it's roughly about 50% of people using Hex. That's what we use. We could talk about build versus buy, or y'all can ping me on LinkedIn about like why we went this route. But 150 unique Underdog employees using Hex for agentic conversations, which has been about 4,000 conversations on our data over the last 90 days. And so I know your data people, you're going to be like, what's this big spike in May 17th? I analyzed it before this call. Don't worry, I use it as an example later. So before I get into maybe the nitty gritty of what we set up, any questions about that before I move over to our actual framework?
Can you tell us a little bit about which users are actually querying, using Hex and querying the data?
Yeah, so I would say we have big groups of people. Definitely product management, engineering. You think about cycling through ideas very quickly, trying to find user stories or who played what types of games, what types of sports, what are they doing? Them, and then I would even say marketing. They are spinning very quickly on threads and tapping people in to literally make RFQs and decisions and try to move quickly. And then our analytics team uses it a lot to offset, I would say, the pools of data. I'm sure y'all feel it if you work in the profession. I just want a list of data. That is great for an agent. Go do the simple query and just give the output. And then you're also not having to maintain a dashboard. So we have a lot of those users and maybe the other places. And then the world that we're going through together is the agentic development of dashboards. So both from our own team moving stuff over to Hex, but also non-analysts, just like you think about Claude or software code or anything. People who haven't been in it are now able to build dashboard assets and things like that, where they want to save off their routine questions and workflows. So it's definitely a mix. I would say it's 33% in all those buckets, but it'll ebb and flow as more data comes online, people get comfortable with it, et cetera.
And do you have senior management using it as well?
Yeah, we have VPs, we have our CEO throwing off questions. There's definitely users at every level, from the analyst level all the way up. And it's actually interesting because there's not really a mold of, oh, a lot of analysts are asking questions. It's actually a lot more of like director, VP, because they can just go straight to the source with whatever's in their head, right? So it's been an interesting sort of change from that perspective.
So how does it look like? Do they need to go to Hex to ask a question?
Yeah, they can use it in either Slack, Claude, so we've enabled it in all those places. And actually, I'll skip ahead to an example instead. But so you can ask it in Slack, you can ask it in Claude, or you could go to Hex directly. You could use it in ChatGPT. Like we've integrated in all these places, and this is what it's as easy as this. So in a thread, in a DM, whatever, at Hex in 2024, I asked what were the top 10 players picked. Can you show a bar chart? You can get way more extreme than this, but just for the example. And the way it works is no matter what your surface is, launches a Hex application, and I'll go back to the slide of what all this stuff is, but basically then checks all of our metadata, our tables, our semantic layers, thought for 2 minutes, and then pulls it into the Slack app. But if you did it in Claude, it would do the same thing. If you do it in Hex, it would do the same thing. And you can then share these results very quickly, right? And then, like I said, all these conversations are logged so we can continue to make the system better.
All right. So what happens behind the scenes when someone asks a question?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I get a lot is, and maybe I felt this way too, is like I'm scared to set this up or my data isn't perfect. My whole stance on it is like your infrastructure doesn't need to be perfect. You have a lot of stuff in front of you by working with data already. And so this is how we've set it up. There's a lot of ways to think about this, and you can also replace like Hex with Claude, and there's some words that are interchangeable here. But the main things are like we first stood up a Hex workspace rule document, like, hey, auto load this all the time. If you're in Claude code, think about that as like your agent's MD file. And this is things like people at Underdog typically want it in Eastern time. When they're asking a question and they don't really care about admin users, right? Like they want actual non-employees, like things that are in the tables that maybe we want available, but we don't query it out, just like an analyst would do in a dashboard. It's like always kind of use this recipe for answering questions. There's the semantic layer. My approach to it is keep it simple, stupid. Like we use it for augmenting our warehouses, not carrying a bunch of load. And so what I mean by that is it describes what a table is used for. It tells an agent like the IDs, you can describe primary keys and foreign keys to be like, how does your user table reach out to your finance table? That's what's important for the agent. And then which columns should be used for metrics. So it's like just keeping flexible guardrails. You have your data warehouse, which can be imperfect. Say you have a lot of staging models. Say it's messy. You have a lot of reporting models, analyst models. If you have good rules and a semantic layer, it can get an agent close enough. And then the way I think about it is like opting in, like over time, as we see questions asked about data, we will then architect good models because that just takes more things to spool through, especially when you talk about cycling engineering time. And then hex guides skills, depending on the surface you're using, is probably where we get the best bang for our buck. We have three main versions of this. We have warehouse table guides. So you can think about anytime a SQL file is built, we add a YAML file for the descriptions. This has always existed in analytics engineering. We add a semantic layer if it helps. And then for like the FAQs or the history of the table, or even putting in like commonly used queries that we haven't had a chance to build out as a table, we'll put that in the ND file as like long text. We have team guides, which are like, how does marketing think about questions? How does product think about questions? Like basically helping that user experience. And then we have analysis guides, which are how do you think about A/B testing, or how do you think about rolling sums? And so the way an agent will work through this without perfect architecture, going back to this screen, is like question is asked. It read the guides that exist, basically doing like string parsing, and oh, this guide helps me come to this answer. It does search our model data, which we've blessed. So it says, hey, these tables look good. These semantic models are attached to these tables. So now I know the IDs and metrics on these things. And then it builds the query. So it's using a combination of like unstructured and structured data to like own in on a good answer. And like I said before, I think the thing I want people to take away is like you can start with a bunch of MD files and messy data, and maybe it gets you like 60% of the way there. And then as you have resources, you can build the reporting cube or the SQL star schema or whatever that will make it better over time, but you don't have to wait on that to deploy it. So I'll pause there, but that's just like the different mechanisms that allow our agent to work, I would say, decently well.
I'm just not sure that I said it at the beginning of the webinar, but if you have any questions about that, please drop them in the Q&A section and we'll answer them after we've finished presenting everything. But I will ask, can you tell us a little bit more about writing the guides? How did you do that? Did you do everything yourself?
Yeah, so to start, I think I just went for it. So like I said, I think not just this is a cliche, but data is a very important asset, but also it describes your business, right? You think about the reports you've built, whether it be in BI tools, live queries you've saved off, maybe some of your DBT repo. You have pieces that describe what your business does today, whether you know it or not. It's just like tying those pieces together. And then additionally, you probably have a Confluence or Notion, WBR, NPR, whatever you like, physical assets that are more like long writing style. And so what I actually did when I started, it was like, hey, read our DBT DAG, pull the Sigma API and figure out the most important dashboards, scan Slack, scan Notion, sent Claude to go off on a journey to go do that for 2 or 3 days. And then it came back and said, these are good MD files. Based on what I've found, this is your table architecture that makes sense. These are how marketing people ask questions. This is how promo people ask questions, right? And then, trust but verify, I had our analytics team, who are really the unsung heroes of all this, like validate iterate on it, and then we launched into production. So I would say I did 80%, like the big aggregator, put it in the garbage disposal, spit it out, and then I had them like review the ones that maybe we were uncertain about. And again, that was all automated, mostly through Claude Code with a little human in the loop interaction at the end.
And just one more question. What would you say are the things that helped you most to get to raise adoption for this?
Yeah, so what like I showed, we point people to Slack. You don't have to. I think when we started, I just told everybody it would only work in this one Slack channel, which was just a bold-faced lie. And so if they read this now, they know. But I we created a product hex Slack channel, and I was like, you have to ask your questions here. They didn't know they could just add hex, but that's fine. But it actually was good because it gamified it in some ways and made them very interested. Two things. People see how easy it is to at Claude, at hex in this channel. They see a lot of other users doing it. They also see the types of questions they're asking and the results of these things. And then they're able to both reference and share those things, but they're able to tag each other in. So that's like the network effect is like our VP of engineering would or product would ask a question and then tag the PM and product person. They see hex and then they go off and start a thread, right? So that was part of it. The second part of it is like we have some weekly readouts of both here were the things asked this week, but also how do you work with analytics to make things better? I would say there's decent adoption on that, but like how do you make context better? You're part of the system. Remember to add stuff to this guide or reach out to your analytics partner, etc. So like keeping that top of mind. And then maybe the funniest thing, or I think it's probably had a good impact, is we started question grading, which you can see down here at the bottom. So like I got a green, I always get green. But in this case, we're a sports company, so I train the agent to give a sports quote and then across three dimensions tell a person the quality of their sort of like question, result, etc., to help coach them. And then also it's cataloged on the back end so we can look at it. So in this case, I asked this question, I was specific with the year, the bar chart, etc. So it gave me this excellence is the gradual result of always striving to do better, Pat Riley. But if I ask the bad question, I don't remember who the quote is, but it's my favorite one that comes through. It says, don't only work on the days that you feel good, and then it gives you a red circle. And that one's absolutely brutal when you get hit with it. But here you can see it says like my question clarity was strong. It only had to interpret like one thing. Data coverage was strong. So this is more of an internal mechanism for like this came from a gold mart or a semantic layer versus having to look at raw data. And then thread health is like, how many cycles did the agent take? Was there a lot of confusion? So it catalogs that confusion. And then if it didn't have a lot of confusion, it's great. We feel good about the answer. To your point, like, when do we feel good about it? If this was yellow and it was like data coverage is bad, thread health is bad, it's talk to an analytics person, please, for the love of God, as soon as you can. That's how we coach and gamify the solution. And I think it's been pretty successful.
So your users give you feedback, but they also get feedback back.
Exactly. It's a two-way street. I'm giving and
Yeah.
taking feedback, whether they want it or not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So I think to the main question of the day is like, how do you maintain all of this? How do you keep it from becoming stale?
Yes. So there is, and actually, I haven't seen Men in Black. I typed in agent into Google Images and it gave me this. And then I was like, oh, that's Will Smith. Can I find him in a harness? And so I put that picture there. So there you go. That's the lore there. I would say there's two ways we maintain it. There's quote unquote on the fly using Codex, Claude Code, user typing in DBT, putting up PRs. And then there is more passive sort of agent doing things weekly, daily to help us do the tasks that maybe either take a long time, we don't feel good about, or we let it drop. Example being like data quality. Data quality always falls to the rear when you're building new things. If we could build a passive agent to help us stay on top of it, that helps. And so our general framework is we have skills, and I'll show some examples of this later, which are accessible both by Claude Code and Hex, and then technically elementary and in any MCP because it's in our repo. Those skills are used by our harness. And what a harness is, if you've read about it in the market, is like, I want a replicated set of steps for an agent. And so I think the best way to maybe think about this is if I'm in Claude Code, I can smash the continue button. I can tell it to go use the tool again. I can tell it to verify. But if you tap the Claude API and you're just letting Claude Code do its thing through an agent, it may not do those things. So these are like rules like, and I'll show it on the next slide, but always select, fan out, use these tools, etc. And then, though we have specific agents with personalities and rule sets to do things, and I'll show examples of those later, but look at our hex warnings. And so, where there's been user doubt, where there's been like issues, or somebody was like, that number doesn't look right, or things that are just happening in chat, pull those in and then augment our DBT repo. Another, I think, very pointed example that's simple but is very good is PII tagging. And I have examples of that. But this is the system we live in to improve. And you can see all of these things, Claude Code, working in the agent, we allow these things to touch the different layers that the Hex agent has access to. So I think the flywheel is like more users are asking questions. Those questions are getting logged, and we can see them in Claude Code. Our agents can see that metadata. It can push PRs to this system, and the questions and answers get better and better over time, right? That's the whole thing with human in the loop, but it's like, how do you have this system provide for itself? So yeah, this is the overview. So the next I'll go deeper into the harness, but I want to pause here for a second.
So just can you tell us a little bit? The harness is actually how every agent runs, right? Is it implemented just by a list of instructions?
So in our case, it's a bunch of Python, or it's a single Python harness script. And it basically has components that say, like in this tool loop, it has a listener for hex warning. So the way you can think about it is maybe if we talk about the steps, it'll make it better. But basically, the harness is like, these are the things we want you to do all the time. And think about these 5 steps being pieces of Python in a script. So here are the assets. If you're an agent, you're allowed to touch all the time. Don't go update our staging models is like an example, or don't go keep it on the rails. So what GitHub assets can you use? And typically we tell it like metadata things. That's what we want you to do for Hex. Fanning out, it basically gives it the tool of don't do it in parallel. I don't want you taking 12 hours to do this job. If you can divvy it up, have different agents go accomplish it in parallel, and then pull that body of work in. And I think the fan out will make more sense when we look at actual agent examples. The tool loop is kind of the same with the select. Here are the tools you can use. Go use elementary, go use Hex, go use GCP. Don't go use like the amplitude MCP or some other random thing that you happen to find and have access to. And then also don't trust that those assets will like not time out. That's the big thing about the tool loop. Like I said, you press the continue button live. It's like ping elementary, check its results, pull it in. Ping Hex, check its results, pull it in. And then these last 2 ones are probably the bigger thing for the harness. Take anything that's created and verify it with a stricter agent. So like, I think 1 through 3, we typically use Sonnet today because it's a little cheaper. And then like before we write the PR, check those results with Opus, right? Be a very objective one time through secondary checker to that work. And it lives in the harness because we want it to be a third party. We don't want it to have any knowledge of what the agents were doing. We just want it to be like, you're an analyst that's been uploaded, check and see what's been going on. And then the final part of the harness is writing a PR. We don't automatically launch anything today. It all writes a PR for human review. And so to your question, I don't want to spend too much time. I want to spend more on the agent part. This is more of the orchestration. The agents are like plugins to your question. So it's like, these are the steps you always want to take, what's available to you, the guardrails. The harness knows where our skills live. It knows where the elementary MCP lives. It knows where Hex MCP lives. And then our agents are specific markdown files, in some cases, Python scripts to be like, when you run, put this into the harness. So the agent follows the same set of steps every time. Our PRs that come out always say automated with a date, and there's always a markdown file that saves so we can reference it. Just all these replicated steps are owned by the harness. Does that make sense to answer that question?
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's
Cool.
dive into the agents.
Yeah, so the agents, I have some examples. I didn't want my legal team coming after me. So if they're not as specific as you want, we can talk more if you ever want to reach out about stuff. But the first one I wanted to call out, this one is different than the others because this is wholly owned by elementary, really. We just schedule it with a GitHub action. But anytime a user puts up a PR in draft mode to adjust something, the elementary CI kicks off and it will give a review across a lot of different tools. And I don't know the specifics elementary would about like how it's kicking off because they own it. But in this case, in this PR, it discovered that there was some stale text in this document. There was also a grain change, and maybe that was needed by the user, or did they just miss it completely? You can see these cautions. And another thing it will do too is it'll tell you the lineage of maybe you're updating a Mart file. Oh, this is touching these reporting assets to the right. So you should talk to these users. And so the way we implement this is we actually have this GitHub action fire with the elementary CI review. We have a co-pilot reviewer that will use that information. And then, like I said before, we will do a final write-up using our skills. So the same skill an analyst has, here are the steps you should take to code. GitHub Copilot reviewer looks at the elementary input and those skills to leave final line comments. So it's like, that's the first line of defense before analytics engineering does a review. Sometimes it's annoying. My analyst friends might say so, but I think it catches more than it over indexes on. So this is the first example of agent in our stack.
Yeah, I just want to say that elementary PR agent only fires when something is changing in the modeling, and then it's supposed to prevent breaking changes that can break usages downstream. Yeah. All right,
Cool.
let's move on.
So the other one, like I said, PI, this one isn't as maybe sexy, but the way we managed Underdog is we have, I'm going to butcher some of this. Hopefully nobody from data engineering is on here, but product and data engineering has stuff in GCP with tags, but there's a drop off when it comes to DBT. And we have the idea of accessible, sensitive, all sorts of stuff, but we have skills that say you should look for the tag, but it doesn't always happen. We know this. So we've created this passive check to basically, hey, once a week, look at both GCP new tags to the left or whatever, if you kept it in a seed file, whatever you want to do with it, whatever the objective truth is to the left, look at PR diffs to see what might have got added so you're not always scanning everything, and then use the elementary lineage to populate those through the DAGs. In this exact example, I got on Monday morning and there was a lot more in here. I think there was like 20, but it was in this model, age bucket should be accessible default, which is just like we're tagging it so we know it's related to age. And then this one down here actually found a latitude longitude one where it was like, oh, this should be restricted, right? That it's not a huge problem, but now in dashboards will update to be hashed. And so this is just passively happening without us having to spin our wheels and check things. So maybe the least sexy one, but this is very depends on elementary to do that lineage checking. And so that's what's going on with this agent in particular.
And then what the analytics agent does with that is that it just doesn't return data from PII columns.
We have a few different things that happen if it's restricted, and it depends on the type of object. Sometimes it hashes it, sometimes it nulls it. It depends. It's still accessible for analytics. It may keep a unique ID, but it'll hash it instead of it being like the user ID. So it just depends on the type. But that's all like
Anonymized.
Exactly. But that's maintained by this macro, and this job is applying the macros based on. So another thing it will also do, because sometimes we overwrite on purpose, it also checks every time, like it looked for other places with latitude in our environment to say, oh yeah, restricted default is typically applied. I'm going to apply that now on top of the lineage. So that's what's going on with this one. One that I think is more interesting is this DAG performance one that James on my team has helped improve a lot. So this one uses elementary for PR diffs, runtime growth, BI usage lineage. We kind of just use all the elementary tools in this one and just use Claude Code, use our stack, use elementary, and it will actually come up with an MD review. We'll probably update this one to eventually be more like the previous ones of actually do code. It's just these are a lot messier, or maybe deal with DAG changes. But in this case, it ran and it found that there was a model consuming 37%. So we have an every 15-minute job, and it's wow, it's taking up a big part of this. And it actually comes up with the recommendation that we then pull down human in the loop, make the update. It said that if we moved a lot of the logic that is in like two CTEs, so they pre-compute, and then it got cut off to the right because I didn't want to share all of our stack, but basically move those to materialized tables, change the configuration, it'll keep it from growing. And then another thing to consider is we have a lot of JSONs and arrays like a lot of people do. This fan out procedure over time is causing the table to grow. So if you moved it out of that, standardized it, made it a static table, whatever you want to do, it would actually greatly improve the performance of this. And again, this is a passive listener. These are the things I think analytics engineering, it's not so much make Hex better, but maybe Hex performance better. Like if our DAG is cleaner and runs better. And I know this just from everywhere I've ever been. You are always focused on building new things. You forget to kind of go back and check as things grow. And this is our solution for that using elementary. Give us suggestions. Go spend a lot of time working on this. and landed MD file in our lap on Monday of what are the three things we should improve this week.
Yeah, but this is exactly the cool things where you get to assign this to some agent in the background and not worry about it and go do cool stuff and deal with the more novel use cases and
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
There's
more
a recipe
complex.
for this, improving this thing. And also, I say we have it pulled down. What do I do with this? I then go give the Claude code to go write a PR. I want to be very real. I act like I'm coding off through this, but at least I'm like watching it. There's probably a world where we just let it do that, right? A lot of this is still experimental.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's the DAC performance one. And then here's the hex one. So we talk about specifically improving hex. So we have skills like in Claude code, we've plugged up hex and elementary and all our tools to be like, look at hex, look for warnings and user doubt, make code. I put up a PR. Like I do that a lot of part of my job. But we also, again, that's a lot of work. So we have this passive sort of hex warning agent. So what this is literally doing is it's tapping the hex API for all the user questions of last week. It has some analysis to figure out, was there user doubt in this question? Did the thread spin a lot? Like I was saying, some of that grading we were talking about, we put in as an MD file of this is how you think about these problems. And then in this case, you'll see it actually it came up with 15 suggestions. It said, hey, here are things you can update. And one example, this was a much bigger file. I think you see it basically created 2,600 lines of context, which we whittled down a little bit. That's the human in the loop part. But here it found that the hex agent was getting tripped up with like states. So it was going to states for our marketing and finance metrics, but it was using the current state and it wasn't using the history table. So in the MD file for states, it said, hey, when this loads, again, if we talk about the flow of how our agent uses things, when the SQL file loads and the semantic file loads and all these things load, also load the state config MD file that tells you when to use history states. But we've used this for a lot of stuff. Like it'll build reusable queries and it'll land it like in our marketing guide. It'll like basically look for assertions in our code. And what I mean by that is maybe in a guide, we say this column is always a null. Don't use it in a metric. If it sees that the hex agent is getting tripped up, it'll actually tap Google BigQuery, figure out if that value does exist, and then write the update. Like it's doing a lot of work to be like, based on agent conversations, how do we automatically make this good, just like an analytics engineer or analyst would be doing in Claude code. And then it uses elementary to check the lineage. Again, play devil's advocate with like growth, like we're adding a lot of context. Does it bloat the job and all that good stuff? But this is the one that's the most like passive listener on hex performance, I would say.
And I see a lot of it as you adding more context and a lot of rows of context. Do you have any mechanisms in place to keep the context from blowing up and becoming
Yep.
huge?
So this is what I always tell people, again, when we go back to getting started, I would say always just start with the big MD file. There are like rules for don't let it be over 400 lines or whatever. There's all sorts of just random, this deteriorates the agent. But what I say, and we were actually working with our data science team on this, and it's what I'll always say, it's like using them as an example. Start with a data science MD file and just throw all the different files in there, like all the different things, like how does this model work? How does this model work, et cetera. And then over time, which we've built in our skills, like once it bloats, like we feel like it's bloating, parse those out into their own MD files. You think about the way Claude searches things is like vector search. It's going to find it. So from a management perspective, I would say don't try to build the perfect architecture for your guides. Let it get longer and longer like a scroll and then cut it up into pieces that make sense and move out. And so that's exactly how, if I go way back, this sort of started. Like originally, we just built, I think I just built like marketing and product. And then I found that some of that information was duplicative. Like it relates to the users table. And so I like took all those sections out, squashed it, put it in a user table guide. And then I found in the user table guide and the product table guide, I was talking about A/B testing a lot, right? So the context was growing. It's make an A/B testing guide. And so we just do that as part of our operating procedure of like assert, verify, pull back, etc. And like the next thing we're working on, which is big in the market, is like evals. That's very up next for us, which I think will help us have a better understanding of do these context updates actually help in favor of bloating or keeping it simpler. So it's definitely more art than science, but that's sort of like how we're riding the wave today.
And you feel like it's managed, like you don't get like in situations where it's too big or too expensive or consuming too much credit?
No, I think as long as I think our rule, which is made up by me, but it's like no longer than 400 lines. It's like just giving it a cap to be like, how do we start to like gate off pieces of information because Hex will do the search. So it's no, I really haven't seen the grading that we really see in Hex is somebody asked like being so excited about a thread and Hex doing a lot of analysis that like all the query and Python code it wrote and all the visuals it wrote, like that degrades the performance, not our context management. It's like the iterating on it in real time.
Cool.
Yeah, and then the last one show, this isn't related to anything. I just thought it was cool. So we have this is kind of like creating data, which is probably a no-no, but anyways, we have a seed file for what are important dates. And this actually came to us last week, so hot off the press, which is why it's closed and I didn't merge it because we're making it better. But it will do a analysis, launch an agent to go search the web for important events, right? So we have a seed file. There's no objective truth for all these sports. And even if there is, how do you say one is more important than the other? So this goes and launches an agent. In this example, it was NFL, but it had NFL, baseball, etc. And it checks dates in the future to figure out you should probably have these flagged in the seed file for your data science team and analytics team. And so in this case, it went out there, did some analysis. It was like, here's kickoff, Thanksgiving, combine, all sorts of stuff. Like you see here, it said, I don't think NFL combine and NFL draft really matter. So it made a choice to do that. And then it actually updated our seed file. So this will dynamically flow through. Again, this is a task where data science used to be doing Python. We were doing things. The agent can do the internet and update a seed file, right? That's very much something it can do. And so this is a different flavor, but we're continuing to build more of these different specific types of agents on top of the DAG review, metadata review, et cetera, to make the flow better.
I wish we needed a sports calendar.
Yeah, working at Underdog is fun. That's my plug for if we have openings. You get to work on fun stuff like this. But
For sure.
to be cognizant of time, the last part is probably the most important part. I think the agents help demonstrate it are the skills. And this has changed a lot to your point about, so you see we have a lot, and maybe that's what I want to call out. In the same way, we have those MD files for Hex and places. I'm just going to smush them all at once. We have these skills. And so this started, I think, as one skill when I started. I was just like, how to work with our repo. Here's some stuff. And then as it grew, I was like, oh, let's break out how we model certain concepts. Again, the vectorizing, pushing things. So here's how you build a test, the semantic layer, reporting. And then it became, oh, we have a lot of tasks we do. We have Claude Code do planning. We have a PII PR review. How do you deal with hex threads? These are probably in one big document, and we're just thinking about the logical pieces here. And so we have a ton of skills. And the other thing, too, is we push those skills to Claude Code. We push it to the agent harness, and then we push them to Hex. You think about the same way you want to be dry with your coding. You want to be dry with your ontology and metadata management. So it becomes easy for one-ish people to work on it. And so this is a prime example that we stood up maybe 2 weeks ago. It was like, oh, we have all these skills, but when somebody logs on the Claude Code and they're an analytics engineer, how should they think about building? And so you'll see here, it literally walks them through and references other skills. So it says, hey, you should probably start in planning mode. And then just the shout out to elementary, our step 0 is check impact first. So before you change any core model, run an elementary impact analysis. Look at the lineage, look at the model. So you're not going and building a MART model that already exists or building a semantic layer that doesn't make sense. And then it goes down the page, like picking the right layer, doing the right task, et cetera. So again, I want to say this is a long text. This is a new world of analytics engineering. And these skills go to all these different places and are maintained in one library for human, agent, bot to all use. And so I guess the last slide I'll show, and then I'll open it up, is this is the VS Code example. So I showed the skills building PRs. I showed you that we call them skills, Hex calls them guides, but we also push them to Hex. So there's a lot of times this reference data model skill also gets pushed to Hex. So Hex can use it. And then people can use it in hex code. So if I go back to that slide, I know you're all just begging for this, is why was May 17th huge? Before this call, we've plugged in everything to use the same skills of the agent. And I just asked, it looks like we had a big jump in hex questions over the week of May 17th. Can you look into those conversations? So it tapped the hex API. It pulled our hex skill, just like our agentic flows would do. It actually chose to use the hex CLI. And it blamed our business analytics team for moving a lot of dashboards over and using a lot of our tokens. And I just thought that was incredible. And if they're on this call, it's okay. It was a good use of tokens if you were building new dashboards. So that's tie it all together about how this flow at a high level. There's a lot more technical intricacies, but the idea of the skills flows into a harness. It helps bots, it helps agents, it helps this. And elementary is a tool that all these things are able to call in to make things better. So that's the end of this sort of presentation interview thing.
Oh, thank you for solving this mystery because I was curious. All right, so do we want to dive into the Q&A?
I'm ready.
All right. Just want to say that you have some fans here, Camden. All right, so question one, what was the rollout strategy for the conversational analytics app? Also, what was the feedback mechanism to improve responses of the agent?
Yeah, so we did. I know I said, I'm a little contradiction here. We said you don't need to be perfect, but we decided not to release it to everybody. So we had a few POCs. We started with our marketing group and we were like, what reporting models do we feel pretty good about and do we want to test Hex on? And then we took that, gave it to a few marketing people, gave it to the analyst, like Hex, and then we stood up that context to be like, both validate the Hex purchase, but also does it work, right? Does this thing work good enough to deploy? So we rolled it out to marketing. I think we probably had 20 people using it. We had 2 data assets. I would say that's the bigger thing. We didn't deploy Hex on all of our data. Again, I'll always call it opting in. We worked quickly to build guides and things. And then we decided to say, oh, great, this product table can exist. This user table can exist. And then once we did that, we would invite users into the fold so we can manage them. And again, had marketing doing it for a couple weeks. We're like, okay, they feel pretty good. Then we moved on to some of the financial users for a couple weeks. Okay, they feel good. And then we got to a point where it's like all the company feels good. We're just optimizing it, right? And so I think that's the best way to set it up is pick teams, roll it out, know it won't be perfect, and don't put it on your entire stack because that's just right for errors to occur. Have a very focused sort of test group and then continue to deploy. The feedback mechanism, we have a few things. So like I said, we actually look at the Hex threads through the API. So that's nobody wants to, I'm going to say this cheekily, nobody wants to help us. So we'll just do it. But then we also in the Slack threads, we stood up a couple workspace sort of documents where it was like, hey, if you're a product person and you ask questions, and I think it had a lot of traction earlier on and it's fallen off, but it was like, just put what you're seeing here or just tag analytics engineering. That happened yesterday. Somebody was like, I don't think this metric is right. So I put up a PR and fixed it, right? We're just in real time. We're either passively looking on the back end and making updates or giving you a forum to put updates or we're watching Slack chats, right? And I would say those are how we're getting feedback because just like things fall off our plate when we're working on things, same for our users who are doing things in the business. Their first idea is not to go tell us that Hex did something wrong, right? So you have to do all 3 to do it right.
All right, thank you. Next question. How do you ensure that questions in Hex are answered by semantic layer or endorsed datasets?
Yeah, the endorsed data sets is easy. I put in the agent file and we basically forced it to only use endorsed data sets. So it's a cop out, but we were just like, just use endorsed data sets. I don't want you using raw stuff within reason. So the way we manage it is we put it in the agent file. You can endorse things in the Hex app, which makes it easy. And then we also put it in the guides. Here's your authoritative or canonical data set. The way we test it is like I said, we have access to the Hex thread API, but if you did it in Claude or anything, you could set up the same sort of system. That warning agent will check I didn't talk about it, but one of the things that also checks was the flow respected. So we tell Hex in the agent MD, the first thing we tell it is use semantic layer first to get information, use gold layer second, use silver layer third, use guide fourth. And then we will actually check through that Hex agent, or if I tap it via Claude Code, was it respected because the order in which it searched information is in the thread itself. And so we keep tabs on it, but it really hasn't been a problem, like just by looking at all the threads, because we put it in the agent MD file that turns on every time. It has respected it, and when we've tested it, it seems to do it like 95% of the time. I think there was a second part of that question, or maybe I answered it. I don't remember.
No, that was it. You have some shout outs from Jonathan and Corey, so thanks.
Legends.
Also, how is the key event date seed file maintained?
Sorry, what was that question?
I think it was I think it was referring to the sports calendar, right? The key event date seed file.
Oh, maintained? Yeah. So, like I said, it's always human in the loop. So I check the agent's work. That's just your typical DBT file. And before, basically, it's happened a couple times. Data science, like analytics engineering took it over, and data science is like, the calendar ran out or the events aren't in the future. And I was like, we always would talk about we'd go to Claude Code to look at it or to go search on the internet. So today it is totally pretty much maintained by that agent. It will check the calendar, assert that the dates are true, like literally check those sports on the open web through a few sources to be like, yep, this is when this thing occurs, puts up the PR to us to extend it, and then we approve it. So that's the maintenance protocol. So that job runs weekly. And so sometimes it's like a PR doesn't come up, but the job ran, it's great. It's still up to date. Other times it's really heavy when it's a big sporting period.
Oh, sorry, the same person added. I meant are individuals adding dates to it, or do you have an agent scraping and validating impact?
Yep. Sorry, that's an more question. Yes, the agent is scraping and validating the impact. So if I was to open up that MD file, it's basically saying I guess this is one thing to call out. We have all of agents always write a doc for us no matter what it's doing, so we can reference it. So just like you put it in planning mode, the agent will write the sport calendar MD file. It'll tell us the exact source. It found the dates. It'll assert like where it's different in our seed file, and it will make the PR update. And then as a human, I'll look at it. I'll be like, you want to make these 10 updates? Check the MD file. Ah, yes, use ESPN.com to figure out that this is when the Super Bowl is. I feel good enough to launch it. So I hope that answers the question. Like I'm pushing the button, but the agent is basically maintaining it.
Cool. All right, next question. How has conversational analytics changed how your data team works with stakeholders? It's obviously a hot topic right now for business teams, but it hasn't been clear to me the additional value outside of convenience since it's so many dashboards reporting assets already exist.
Yeah, so I would turn that on its head. Do you enjoy maintaining a lot of dashboards and assets? I think when I think about it, if you've ever been through like a migration, it's like, how are we going to move these 1,500 dashboards over? And then you think about it and it's, wow, people really only look at 10 of these. And the others were either ad hoc things or we don't even know if they're accurate, et cetera. The way I think it's changed on its head, which I think most people probably agree with this, is like the analytics team can focus on 5 or 10 codified assets. This is our WBR. This is our board reporting. This is our marketing reporting dashboard. There is a true suite of dashboards, and most other questions are direct. We may have answered them through a dashboard, but then we're adding more filters, we're adding more widgets. It's like they can just be in real time, right? And so I think you get rid of a lot of that fat from all the stuff in the BI tooling. And then it also frees you up because that's what we've done a few times when we've added people in. It's I'll talk about the list of data. It's like analysts were getting blown up, death by 1,000 cuts. Can you pull this data? Can you pull this data? Can you pull this data? An agent can easily do that and free the analyst to focus on, I think it's what everybody's doing, like moving left, like focused on like governance and architecture or being a true partner to the business or like leverage activities and data quality or how those teams think about data instead of building a quick dashboard to answer a question. Like I think that's like the shift that like is occurring. So there's still some dashboards. It's just like the ad hoc questions are now answered by an agent. It's more of a validation effort and making sure the inputs are good instead of focused on the outputs that would sometimes end up in the trash anyways, right? I think that's kind of like the wheel that's shifting a little bit.
And just a quick follow-up for me is, do you really feel the impact of that work? Do you feel like the dashboards that are maintained are better? Do you feel like the products from the analysts became better because they had more time to focus on them?
I think so. I can't speak to that, but one of the prime examples I think we did recently is like a lot of people do. We were like reassessing our like revenue definitions for things. Like we were moving a lot of stuff from like reporting layers, so ad hoc queries and like analyst owned sort of tables to core modeling. Oh, we want to move this stuff over. And while the agent handles like little questions, we were able to work directly with the analyst to do a real big deep dive on like how do we define all these things, architect it, et cetera. And then we moved to Hex. Two things basically happened. Instead of having 30 reporting cubes that used to go all over the place for a dashboard to work, they now have exactly one WBR finance file that lives on our core infrastructure. And they have exactly one daily review Hex dashboard. And then actually to take it even one step further, we just got it up and running. Kennedy's on a much well-deserved vacation, but every morning the dashboard lands in a Slack channel, and then we actually have an agent analyze it and give an update of what were the 5 top things for yesterday that all our leaders can just read, right? So it's one dashboard, one place, one set of comments. And what was really cool last week is, or maybe it was yesterday, our product and marketing team were giving their human insights on it instead of it just being like a dashboard that nobody ever talks about, right? It's very living and automated. And now analysts can focus on real things, at least in my mind. But some people might debate
Yeah.
that.
No, it sounds great. Last question for today. Have you had to roll back any of the weekly changes at the earlier phases of the project?
Not roll back. What we do have to do, you'll notice some of those were like closed. Like I iterate on it. Even like building some of these agents in the harness over the last couple weeks, like it was like built it, let it run over the weekend. It got to 80% good. And then I was like, great, pull them down. There's a lot more human intervention to make sure the PR was right. And then, like I said, it's all about giving recipe and feedback to the agent itself. Like I did commits, I gave comments to how I thought the agent did well, didn't do well. And then I went to Claude Code again. I said, hey, improve the agent to work like me, make all these updates. And then it did it and it ran again. And then I was like, this week it was like, oh, it's 90% good. Do it again. And it usually takes about a month. So it's not really roll back. I think it's like using your knowledge of what a good design looks like and then being patient that like I'm keeping good notes, I'm teaching the agent how to do this thing, and then being iterative. Again, it's all not, I don't want to call it risk in a bad way, but it's like, oh, great, this automated 90%. I'll pull it down and next week it'll automate 95%, right? That's the way I think you have to think about it rather than like rollbacks. But we haven't had to roll back anything. If anything, we've had to be like, we need to pay more money for like licenses and all this different stuff because people love it so much, which I guess is like a good problem to have. But yeah, it's taken off. I think when we started, we were like, oh yeah, like 30 people will probably use this or something. It's like, it'll be useful. And then, like I said, we've gone up to 150, 90 days. Oh, well, didn't size that. So that's on me.
Camden, thank you so much. We're so happy to be working with you and with a team that moves so fast and we're learning so much. And we in elementary are inspired and developing our product to be inspired by the things that you're doing in your team. So thank you for that as well. Thank you for teaching us and for participating in this webinar. I think we had a lot of good questions and a lot of people who took a lot from that. Again, I was very happy to do this with you. Yeah, I appreciate your time and everybody's for participating. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And like I said, this isn't paid for, but we use elementary in a lot of our processes. It does make it like one of the important things we talk about plugins, like just the saying that Hex is a tool and Claude's a tool. You want your tools to talk like elementary, like I said, especially when it comes to like DAG reviews and the PR, and I would say better than a lot of the DBT homegrown stuff. Like it's a good augmentation of that. It is a good tool, especially for the price if you're building the system to plug in. So that's my last little like shout out. And I appreciate you having me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being here. Have a great day.